Welcome back to Planet 40k. We've got another video for you today, and we've also got a special guest for you. We've got IDICBeer 40k Necrons and more. How are you doing, Nick?
Hello everyone, I'm doing very well, thank you.
Welcome to the channel. And so today we're going to be talking about some of the best performing units for Necrons in 9th edition, and also some of the biggest letdowns. But before we get into that, make sure you are subscribing to Nick's channel, IDICBeer 40k. Why did I go for it again? Necrons
and more.
Necrons and more. I might even leave that in. I don't know.
Yeah.
So if you aren't aware of who he is, then, well, you've been living under a rock, because it is the biggest Necrons channel at this moment in time. I'm coming for you, Nick. Don't you worry about that. I'm coming.
I reckon you'll get there.
But he's a 14-year veteran YouTube. Started in 2009. He covers tactics, lists, hobbying, painting. What else do you do, Nick? You do all sorts, don't you?
Yeah, that pretty much covers it. Anything basically to do with the hobby.
Yeah, so yeah, subscribe. Get onto Nick's channel, subscribe down below. The link will be in the description down below, in fact, for Nick's channel. Also, before we get into today's video, in fact, if you go over to Nick's channel, so we spoke about what 9th edition has actually done for Necrons. So yeah, head on over to Nick's channel after this video, and you'll find that video where we're both talking about that. Right, plugs are all out the way. Let's get on with today's video. So I'm going to start this off. In fact, what is the best unit I think for Necrons in 9th edition? For me personally, that one that won me loads of games was the Lokhust Heavy Destroyers. You guys know I love the Lokhust Heavy Destroyers, but in particular I love them with the Technomancers, bringing a model back every turn. Have you ever used that kind of strategy before?
I have to be honest, I haven't.
No?
Obviously,
Wow.
I know that you use it quite a lot, but
Yes.
I've not really done that strategy, to be fair.
Oh, it's magic, especially if you've only got 3 of them, and you take the prismatic. They know I can't say this. The prismatic obfuscation, you know the one I'm on about.
Yeah, the one.
That cryptic arcana. When you take that, you can't target the Technomancer. It was just magic, because as soon as they start targeting your Lokhust Heavy Destroyers, you just pop one back. It's not a problem. Yeah. Especially with the Canoptek Cloak as well, healing D3. So that was my first one. Nick, what about you? What was your best performing unit for Necrons in 9th?
Well, just going back to your Lokhust Heavy Destroyer one, and the reason why I haven't used that cryptic is because I find that the unit just got wiped out just in one go. If it was targeted, it was dead. So that was the main reason why I didn't sort of use it. But I think it depends on your opponent that you're playing as well, if they've got that ability to do that. And I play against Orcs all the time, and they've got an awesome amount of shooting, and if they get close combat, whatever they touch dies. So that was the reason why I didn't use it. But I can certainly see, against an army which can do some wounds but not necessarily kill a whole thing in one go, it could be very useful just to keep that unit alive. So yeah, I am with you, but not necessarily in my gaming environment as such. Okay. However, the unit which one of my standout units is the Canoptek Wraiths.
Okay.
Now, even though they did take quite a big hit over time, losing their 3+ invulnerable save, so a 4+ invulnerable save, even with that, they've always performed well for me. What I like about them the most is they're a standalone unit. They don't necessarily need support.
No.
They do work well with support. If their Mine Will Be Done to help them hit on 3s rather than 4s, that's great. But they can go out, and with that invulnerable save, they can, they can work by themselves. And the fact that they're fast moving. And also, of course, when they're in the assaults, they can fall back and re-assault and gain ground. And they've just been overall just really good for me. And I know when I put Wraiths on the table, it makes my opponents think, that they need to deal with them. And that can take pressure off the rest of the army as well.
What about in terms of damage? Because I found them quite, not underwhelming, I think that's too strong, but they didn't seem to do enough for me in terms of damage. How did they do for you?
I think it depends what you're up against. If you're up against like Space Marine type units, -2 and 2 damage is really good. It's fair to say against Orcs, they're probably not that great. They've got things like Ramshackle and things as well, which doesn't help. So the damage output probably not that great. But I think for most of 9th edition, winning with Necrons hasn't been about what you kill. It's been about getting your points. Wraiths are very good at that with their movements, etc. Yeah.
Okay. So let's get on to my next pick of the day. I'm going to be going with the Necron Ghost Arks. Now, I've always loved these Ghost Arks, the look of them, the way they interact with the game itself. I think they are, definitely one of my favourite units within the Codex. And what most people were...
Sorry.
It's all right. Caught me off guard. Now, the way most people were playing with the Ghost Arks was they were using it as a transport, but I was actually doing the complete opposite. I was just using them as a battering ram, just to tie up units, just to get onto primaries, maybe even score secondaries. That's the way I was using Ghost Arks, and I was having a lot of success with them, especially in the later part of 9th edition. How did you get on with the Ghost Arks? Any luck with those?
I didn't really play them that much, mainly because I wasn't really playing warriors that much. I was pretty much taking objective secure dynasty code, so not really taking troops that much. And without taking the warriors, I haven't really been taking Ghost Arks. I played them a few times. I did have a couple of lists, for a little bit with them in, and they did well. Generating extra warriors themselves can be quite useful, along with obviously other things, so they can help your warrior survive. I didn't really use them in the battering ram scenario. I tended to use things like annihilation barges for that job. But yeah, I mean, it certainly is a good way to use them.
So yeah, what I did with the Ghost Arks, I was also using the objective skill dynasties and the Hillock dynasty with my Ghost Arks, but I wasn't actually putting warriors in the Ghost Arks. I was just putting HQs in the Ghost Arks, so it'll be, say, a Technomancer or an Overlord, pop them out turn 1, and then just throw the Ghost Ark away to do its thing. That's how I did it. I know you've got a very interesting second pick for today's video, so I'll let you crack on with that one. What have you got, Nick?
So yes, my second pick is the Command Barge, believe it or not, coupled with the Silent King. But the Command Barge actually is my main pick, but I used to use him quite a lot with the Silent King. Those two on the table, that gave you 3 My Will Be Dones, which was really useful, especially obviously with the King's reroll abilities for core units around him as well. But the Command Barge, in my opinion, also helped with lots of other stuff as well. So of course, Code of Combat, when that was a thing, is a nice backup to the King. So even if your King did go down after a couple of turns, at least you had your Command Barge to take some more points if possible. And I used to use it with the Voltic Staff quite a lot. So the Staff of Light and the Voltic Staff as a nice combo. And the Command Barge would also push forward with my Wraiths as well, so get those will be done. So they worked quite well with the Wraiths. And of course the speed on him as well. Now I do appreciate it's fairly cost sort of heavy, but I found it was a really good HQ. Reliable HQ, always did some output, helped buff other units quite well. So yeah, the Command Barge, and I used it quite a lot, to be fair, in most of my lists.
At the start of the edition, I was very much using the Command Barge in almost every list, but the expense of it, I think it was sort of the reason why I stopped using it. I mean, at one stage I was using 2 Command Barges in one list, but yeah, it was 160. I can't remember off the top of my head now. 160 points or something. It just got a little bit too pricey for me. I'd rather just take a Technomancer and then fluff up the rest of my army with other battlefield roles. So I'm going to get on to my third pick now, and I believe, Nick, this is also your third pick, so we're going to have a bit of a joint one here, and it's the Canoptek Scarab Swarms. I'll let you go with this one first.
Yeah, an incredibly versatile unit, and pretty much made it into most of my lists in one shape or another. Either just small little units to take objectives, just sit at the back, maybe block some areas of the board, so anti-deep striking units, but also obviously as bigger units to go out and cause some trouble, take mortal wounds if they're needed. And the great thing about them, whether you have 3, 4, 6 in a unit or 9, is a very playable unit. So I had a lot of success with Scarabs. Yeah.
Yeah, especially if they've got objectives secured as well, they were fantastic.
Even better, and of course ancient machineries as well, being able to do those.
Yeah, definitely. Right, so that's the units that we think have performed well over 9th edition. Now we're going to talk about some that have been a bit of a letdown. I'm going to reel off a bit of a list here, then I'm going to pass it over to you, Nick. So I'm going to start my list off with the Doomstalkers. Now, they appeared in the Indominus box set at the start. Well, it was just before the start of the edition. They look pretty cool, don't they? I mean,
yeah,
big letdown with the D6 amount of attacks, the D6 amount of damage. They're hitting on a 4+ because they're Canoptek. They've got the blast keyword on top of that, so if they do get tagged, they're not going to be firing. And yeah, they were just sitting ducks for me. And I know a lot of people in the comments do actually like the Doomstalkers, but they just never did anything for me. Another model from that same box was the Canoptek Reanimator. I call it the bookend. It went on my shelf and it didn't come back down again because it just never made its points. Even though they reduced the points cost of it halfway through the edition, it was just a huge letdown. It never made its points back up. It just stuck out like a sore thumb. It had no invulnerable save. And that aura, well, it isn't an aura, but it is an aura, but it isn't an aura. The ability just stinks. The stratagem that's attached to the Reanimator also stinks. It's 2 command points to do that, to change up the focus of the beam. Yeah, that's another one of my letdowns. I'm going to go with the third one here, and this one's going to shock a lot of you, and I'm going to go with the Nightbringer. Now, the Nightbringer is probably one of the most... yeah, exactly. One of the most powerful models in the 40k game. You guys know I love the Nightbringer as well. I used to bring it to all my games. In fact, Nick, I brought it to your tournament, didn't I, last summer?
You did.
But against most factions nowadays, it just sucks because, especially psychic factions or any factions that can produce mortal wounds in any of the other phases, it just doesn't last that long. By the time it gets to your opponent to do stuff, it's dead. Or maybe it will slaughter through one unit and then it's dead. And to make its points up, I find throughout the edition, I was sort of struggling to do so.
When you're relying on the units to explode and do damage, then you know you're in trouble, aren't you?
Yeah, that's exactly it. But yeah, at the start of the edition, I absolutely loved it. I used to get teased for bringing it to 1K games. I was that person again next tournament. But yeah, I'm going to add the Nightbringer here, and I want to add one more before I pass this over to Nick, which is the Psychomancer. The Psychomancer at the start of the edition, it looked like it had a lot of promise. The abilities looked fantastic, and a lot of big YouTubers, in fact, were saying this was going to be an auto-include. And I played it once, and I thought, you know what, I don't think it is. In fact, I'm going to ask you, what's your experience with the Psychomancer, Nick?
Oh, he's so good that I never used him.
Oh, right. It's like that.
Yeah, no, I never actually used him. And to be fair, that's quite unusual because usually I force myself to use units which aren't that great. Like the Reanimators, you know, I've played a few lists where I've said, right, I'm going to take them just to try them out and play them.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Psychomancer never did. Although this is probably in the wrong category. This should be in the good category. But I did force myself to use the Plasmancer quite a lot. And actually, I had reasonable success with him. But the issue is that there are other characters which are better.
That's the problem, yeah.
Yeah, but the Psychomancer just never made it into a list, unfortunately. So
the problem is the ability is 12 inches. It's not, that range is just not enough. It's not moving that quick anyway. I believe it moves 5 inches anyway. So unless you're putting a Veil of Darkness Relic or the Dimensional Sanctum Arcana or something to get him up the board, or you're waiting on units to come close, it's just a bit of a situational kind of character.
Yeah.
So Nick, I'm going to throw this over to you now. What have been your most underperforming units for 9th edition?
Yeah. For me, the most disappointing unit has to be the Fortification. No. Because let me explain. Because when we got the models, they were my favourite models out of the whole release of all the new models. They looked absolutely awesome, super cool. It was the model that I first built and painted out of all the new releases. Really, really loved the miniatures. But until very recently, until the new changes that we've had, they've not been very good to use. you know, really, really tough to use and actually do anything on the table. And I have tried. I've played them quite a few times, but they're really bad. I mean, now of course they have changed, which is probably why you know you like them. 80 points, you know, behind enemy lines. Although I can't get behind enemy lines with them playing against orcs most of the time.
It was more for the anti-deep strike for me, but as soon as the strategic reserves became free, that's when these pillars, or whatever you want to call them, they became more useful because strategic reserves became more common. So that's for me why.
True, but then I could take 3 scarab swarms and just block the same space, and they can hide behind a piece of terrain.
Yeah, you could. 3 scarab swarms is 45 points. That's going to only give you 1 little area, whereas this is going to give you 3 areas for 80
3
points.
areas for 80 points, yeah. But then you could take 2 units of scarabs.
You could.
Yeah, but like I said, that's more recent times. I mean,
that's true.
You haven't felt they've been good. Yeah, you haven't liked them the whole edition, have you?
I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, and in terms, like I said, for me, where I love the model so much, you know, not to be able to use them apart from terrain effectively for most of the edition, that was like a real disappointment for me.
Yeah. Got any more on your list?
Yes, so my next disappointment is going to be the Hexmark Destroyer. We do disagree slightly on these.
We have to disagree.
Yeah, I mean, Hexmark Destroyer, again, another really cool miniature. When it first came out, we thought, or at least I thought, this is going to be our Necron assassin unit.
Yeah,
you know, because assassin, you know, they were coming into a lot of different armies, these assassin type characters. But for me, it's just really, really underperformed. You know, it's a cool miniature, all those guns that it's got, but it just comes down and doesn't really kill anything. And whilst, yeah, potentially you could use it to help maybe take objectives, etc. For me, it was just a bit disappointing. I'd like to have seen it maybe as a like a unique miniature, so you can only take 1 of them. But for it to actually do some damage, obviously we did get the Armies of Renown with the red thing for it. That was good. That was nice to see. But that would have been better if it would have been in the actual, you know, main rule set, I think.
Yeah, as you play orcs quite often, I would have thought that Hexmark Destroyers would have been a go-to unit for you, really.
No. No, it's very hard to get him into a position to start with because there's so many orcs just covering all of the table. They're like everywhere. So actually being able to deep strike him in is quite hard. And then when he comes in, he just doesn't really kill anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then thirdly, which is sort of in the same vein, I suppose, death marks. I'm going to say death marks. I've used death marks quite a lot, especially at 1,000 points. Played around with a unit of 5. And actually, it was between death marks and flayed ones, my choice. And whilst death marks are slightly more tougher, they can come down, shoot, do actions. For me, again, because maybe the opponents that I was playing, I couldn't really get them down on an objective, so I had to come away from an objective, which meant he came down, he shot. The guns never really did anything for me, and then they just died. But at least when I was playing my flayed ones, I could come down, not on objective necessarily, but I could then assault someone on an objective. And then if I was objective secure, claim that objective, and then actually, assuming I got into the assault, then at least I would actually do a bit more damage. So, yeah, death marks again. Just don't really kill much. That's my main issue with them. They don't kill anything.
I think we play death marks slightly differently. I don't tend to deep strike my death marks. I keep them at the back of the field. Just go character hunting, or at the very least guard an area from characters, you know, stepping into, if you like. I don't take them in 5s. I take them in 10s. I think 5 doesn't do enough.
Yeah, obviously that was in the 1,000 point games. I have played units of 10 like in 2K. I have to admit, I've always deep striked them because it's like that's their special rule, and obviously you can come in your opponent's turn, so that can mess with their the way they play sometimes. But yeah, I mean, obviously, in the old days, that's what you did with death marks, is you put them on the table in terrain to get that cover save benefit, and of course, then you're shooting on twos from turn one, aren't you? But even when even playing them that way, I don't know, the guns just didn't really seem to do the enough damage for what they can do. I'd rather take a unit of 10 immortals.
Okay, fair point. Fair point. I've got one more to add to this. In fact, I'm gonna add the Scorpec Lord. If you remember the video for the intro of 9th edition, it had the Scorpec Lord, didn't it? And he was bombing around, killing, was it Space Marines? And we thought, wow, we've got a huge melee monster here. And well, it's not even a monster, is it? It's an infantry model.
Yeah.
I just think that was another letdown. I think they could have absolutely beasted him up, given him a lot more wounds. I don't mind if he's more expensive. I mean, he's already quite expensive, but I don't mind if he's more expensive. But they could have gave him a lot more and made him an absolute beat stick for the Necrons, rather than relying on a Nightbringer to do that beat stick kind of role.
Yeah. I almost think, well, obviously we had so many new models, GW maybe just didn't know quite what to do with them all. So they gave them some mediocre type rules, let's say, to make sure they don't go too powerful. I'm hoping that now they've had the whole edition of these new units, they're going to be able to tweak them and put them in the right place. Because it's fair to say that a lot of these newer units that we had were a bit disappointing. I mean, probably Scorpec Destroyers are probably going to be the main ones that weren't disappointing. They've been good from the get-go, but a lot of the others, like you say, just haven't lived up to par, really.
Right, guys, that's some of our best units from the Necron Codex for 9th edition and some of the biggest disappointments. So yeah, head on over to Nick's channel now, where we've got another video for you. Other than that, guys, all that's left to say, thank you all for watching. See you in the next one.